Okay, so somebody asked about number 9, how to do this, how to factor this problem right here. And it's a trinomial, so it's just like a quadratic, except it has an x term in every one of these terms. So you want to take out an x, and then you want to take out the greatest common factor of 54, 58, and 480. And to find that, you have to factor those three numbers. So I put the 5588 first. I don't know. I was just doing the bigger number. And I factored it down to 6 times 98, and then 2 times 3, 49 times 2, and then 2 times 3 times 7 times 7 times 2, if I break those down. Okay, then I factored down 54 to 9 times 6. Then it's minimal factors, 3 times 3 times 3 times 2. Then 480 to 10 times 48, then 2 times 5 times 6 times 8. Then you want to look for what they all have in common, what all three have in common. And I saw a 2 and a 3 in both of them, in all of them. So I circled a 2 and a 3, 2 and a 3, and then 6 is 2 and 3. And if there were any more that they all had, then I would go ahead and circle those, but there aren't any. So that tells me 6 is the biggest number that goes into all of these. So I want to take out a 6x, because they all have an x in it, and then I'm going to take my calculator and divide 54 by 6, which is 9. So I'm going to have to multiply by 9x squared, 6x by 9x squared to get 54x cubed over here. Plus, and how many times is 6 going to 588? My calculator, 588 divided by 6 is 98 times. So plus 98x, because I already have an x here, so x times x makes x squared. 480 divided by 6, 480 divided by 6 is 80 times, so plus 80, I don't need an x because there's already an x out here and there's only one x here. So that is how you take out the greatest common factor first. You want to take out the GCF whenever there's three terms and they all have an x in it and the numbers are pretty big. You want to break down those numbers and find out what's the biggest number that goes into all three of these. A 6 and an x goes into all three of these. Now we just have a simple quadratic that we can factor this down. So now we need to factor, sorry, using the eraser tool. Okay, so now we need to factor this guy, which is pretty big, and usually I would just do some guess and check like in the video, but since these are pretty big numbers, I'm going to go ahead and multiply the a term and the c term. 9 times, you have to multiply those two terms. I always draw like a hat to remind myself to do that. 9 times 80 is 720. So that's what we put in the top of our diamond. So I wrote a 720 at the top here. The middle term goes on the bottom, and I'm going to try and find the two factors that go here and here that add up to 98 and multiply to be 720. Well, I made a little factor tree here, and I thought, you know, what do I think of? 10 times 72, they have to make 98. That doesn't make 98. Then I think of 8 times 90 or 9 times 80. These two make 98. So that's the number that goes here. It's 8x and 90x. Okay, so those two numbers go here and here in your box. You're going to make your generic rectangle that we did in Math 1. Your middle terms go, those are your middle terms. That's your 98x. And then the first term, the 9x squared, goes here. The last term, the 80, goes here. And then we're going to factor this. So erase those two lines. So let's say I factor this. I say, what goes into 9x squared and 90x? That would be a 9x goes into both of those. I factor that. What goes into 8x and 80? That would be an 8. What goes into 9x squared and 8x? An x goes into that. What goes into 80 and 90x? 10 goes into that. So there's your factors right there. We have 9x, and we're either going to do plus or minus 8, and then x and a 10. Now to determine if this is plus or minus, I look at my signs. Oh, it's a plus and a plus. That's the easiest one to do, because if they're all positives, then that means all these are positive. That's a plus, and that's a plus. And you always want to double check your inside and your outside terms for your FOIL. This is the FOIL method we're doing. First, inner, outer, last. Check your outer and inner terms. My outer term is 9x times 10, which is 90x. My inner terms, when I multiply 8 times x, is 8x. So when I add those two together, I get the middle term, 98x. So that's where your 98 is. And then you want to check your last terms, 8 times 10, that gives me the last term over here, 80. And then the 9x times x, that gives me my 9x squared. So this is how you factor that using the generic rectangles, using the, I call this X box method. You do the X and then you do the box. You need to use the X box method whenever you have a leading coefficient that's not 1. So now we've factored that, and you can't factor 9x plus 8 anymore. You can't factor x plus 10. You got to put this 6x in the front. So this is how you completely factor 54x to the third plus 588x squared plus 480x. Okay, I've got, there's 3 x's, so you have to have 1, 2, 3 x's. When I multiply these out, 6x times 9x times x, it's going to give me 54x to the third. When I multiply all this, I'm going to get this, and then times 6x is going to give me all this. So we're doing the reverse. We're breaking these down into these factors, and which we did in Algebra 1 and Geometry, or Math 1 and Math 2. So this is review from that.